Alright guys, in today's video, we are going to take a look at the HTML table padding and spacing. So the HTML table padding is a space between the cell edges and the cell content. And by default, the padding is set to 0. And so for us to add padding to a table cell, we use the CSS padding property to do that. And how to do that is like, as you see now, this second example I have here on my screen. This is a table with a default padding value, which is set to 0. As you can see, like I said, that the padding is the space between the cell edges and the cell content, just as you can see all this content here. So if we have to give a padding to all this content, then it's going to be the space inside all the content. So, like for example, if we happen to go to our text editor now, so here on our text editor, for us to add a padding to the table, and you know that is going to be for the table cells. And also, like I said shortly, that for us to do that, that we have to make use of the CSS padding property, which in the sense that if I happen to come down here now inside my start element to give a padding to my HTML table, then I'll first of all start targeting the table head, then comma, make a space. Next, the table datas, now followed with opening and closing of the curly brackets. Now, inside the curly brackets, I'm going to now define the padding property by saying padding followed with colon. Then now I'm going to specify a value, and that value can be specified in percentage or in pixels, but we normally use pixels. So now, for us to give padding to our table, all we have to do is, let's say if I happen to give it a value of, for example, 20 pixels, then enclose it with semicolon. And as it is now, remember, we have not saved it. Let's first of all go to our web page and see how the default looks on our web page. Then we can come back and save this so that we can see the difference clearly. Okay. So now, without saving it, I open up my web page. As you can see, this is how it looks. Now I go back to my text editor and save it. Then go back to my web page again. And now you can see that we have added the padding to our table. So like I said earlier, that is a space between the cell edges and the cell content. So as you can see, that it's added space inside between the contents and the cell container. So this is by adding padding to the HTML table. And if you happen to come back to our text editor right now, here now, as you see, what I used here is padding. And I did not specify which place I want to add padding. So which means that this padding I added here, this 20 pixels, is added to the four corners of that particular cell or of that particular container. Like if I open it up again now to show you, it means the padding we added is added here by the left one, and at the top two, by the right three, and the bottom four. That is the way it is counted in CSS. So now by adding a padding to them, like you see that we added 20 pixels. So it means that the 20 pixels is added on all the four corners, 20, 20, 20 pixels. So that is what it means. But there is a way you can do it to specify in which particular angle or edge that you want to add the padding to. So you can decide that you want to add padding to only at the top or at the bottom, or be it to the left or to the right. So, and to do that is by, if we go back to our text editor now, back here. So instead of us using padding alone, now we are going to specify the individual places we want to add those padding to. So like for example, I can come here and say padding dash top. So this means that I'm targeting only the top to give padding to the top. I can now follow it up with colon and say, for example, 20 pixels to the top, then enclose it with semicolon. Now, if you go ahead and save it right now, then go back to that web page again. Here, if you notice, the space, as in the padding, is given only at the top of all the cells here. But maybe you didn't notice the space because I gave it a small value. So for that, if I come back to our text editor right now and say, okay, let's say I give it 30 pixels. Go ahead and save it again, then open the web page again. You can see now that the 30 pixels padding is given to the top of all the cells here. So in that same hand, let's say you want to give a padding to the bottom also. So for that, if you go back to your text editor now, here, you can also say, okay, I want to give padding to the bottom. So for that, you come here now, you specify the bottom by changing it from padding dash top to padding dash bottom. So you can see now that we have padding dash top here and the padding dash bottom here, which means we are giving padding or spaces, as you may call it, to the top of the cell of the table and also to the bottom of the cell of the table. So go ahead and save it again and go back to your web page. And just as you can see now, that we have given 30 pixels padding to the top and the bottom of the cell of the table. So the same way you added the spaces at the top here and also at the bottom, it's the same method you are also going to use to add spaces to the left and also to the right. So in that aspect, if I come back to my text editor now, here, if I say I want to add to the left and to the right also, so like we did here, is the same method. You go ahead with padding dash left and the other one padding dash right. Then go ahead and save it. And now go back to the web page again. And here, as you can see, you have given padding to all of them individually. So with this, you can specify different value of padding or spaces for each different position. So just as you see that as it is like this now, if I go back, I can decide to reduce the padding at the top to let's say 10 pixels and go ahead and save it again, then go back to your web page. And now you can see we have reduced the top padding. So now going back to our text editor again, and now the next one is the table spacing. Like as you know, in this video, we are meant to take care of two things. That is the HTML table padding and the table spacing. And now that we are done with the table padding, then let's move over to the table spacing. So in table spacing, like I showed you from the beginning of this video, the picture of how the table spacing and the table padding looks. So as you know that the table padding is to give space to the edges and the content of the cell of the table. But the cell spacing in HTML table is the space between the cells, just as you can see this example here. So you can see that the space we have added so far are inside, which means it's padded. But now we want to add a space in between all the cells that we have on our table. So in HTML table property, we use the CSS border space property to give space to the table of an HTML. So in making use of that, if we happen to go back to our text editor right now, back here, so for us to give spaces in between all the cells we have in our HTML table, then like I said shortly, that we have to use the CSS border spacing property to do that. And for us to do that, if we come here on our styling, I'll come here and start to target the table. Like as you know, that the space is outside the cells. So which means it is the table that we have to target because all these boxes here are the table cells. So the table is where we are going to target. So back here, so like I said, we target the table by saying table. followed with the opening and closing of curly brackets. So now inside here now, I'm going to say border dash spacing followed with colon. Then now I have to go ahead and give it a value. So the value, like we did with the padding, can be in pixels or in percentage. But like you know, we are making use of pixels. So for that, if I happen to go ahead and specify 10 pixels, then enclose it with semicolon and go ahead to save it. And now go back to your web page. And as you can see here now, we have given 10 pixels spaces in between all the cells we have here. And by default, the space between is set to 2 pixels. So that is why if we go back to our text editor now and remove this declaration, then save it and open your web page again. And as you can see, the little spaces there is set by default, and the value of that default space is 2 pixels. So and if we go back to our text editor and go ahead and add our declaration, bearing in mind that is already 2 pixels there. If you like, you can increase it or decrease it. Like if I say 20 pixels and go ahead and save it again, then go back to our web page again. Here you can see it's 20 pixels spaces in between all the cells. So and with this, that brings us to the end of this particular table padding and spacing video tutorial. So in the next video, we are going to continue with the HTML table col span and the rule span. So that will be the focus of the next video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.